She thought no one noticed. Every time she washed his shirts, she would discreetly spray a soft floral perfume on them, the same one her mother wore when she went to church on Sundays. It was her hidden gesture, her silent presence in his world. And he thought the smell came from the expensive soap he bought without even looking at the label, until the day the shirt came back with no scent at all, no trace of her. That was when he realized that the perfume that accompanied him every day was love, and that she was gone. On that grey morning, he put on the white shirt he always wore to important meetings. Something was strange. The fabric seemed the same, the cut was the same, but the smell was gone. For the first time, he felt an emptiness in his chest that he couldn't explain. And then he realized the old maid, the one who always avoided his eyes, had been fired days ago. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence. And now he missed something he never knew how to name, the invisible care that only silent love can leave in the memory. If this story has already caught your attention in the first few seconds, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It makes all the difference in helping more people find stories like this. He had always been a man of fixed habits. He would wake up at 6, run for 30 minutes on the state-of-the-art treadmill, drink coffee with dry toast, and read his emails with the coolness of someone who was born to give orders. He wore perfectly ironed white shirts, straight-legged pants, and shoes that shone like mirrors. In the eyes of everyone, he was an exemplary executive, a man admired and feared by employees, suppliers, and even his own partners. He had an impeccable, silent, extremely organized home where no one dared leave a glass out of place, except for her, the woman in the blue uniform who climbed the stairs with measured steps and careful hands. She didn't talk much. She would answer with a, "Yes, sir," and "It's ready," keep her head down and avoid eye contact. But there was something about her that, without him realizing it, became part of his daily life, like the sound of the clock striking the hours. The shirts always had a delicate scent, different from the usual laundry products. It was a soft, almost imperceptible floral perfume that mixed with the smell of his own body. At first, he thought it was just some different soap. Then he thought maybe it was his imagination. He never asked. He never thought to thank her. To him, she was just another maid among so many who had passed through the house. But the curious thing is that ever since that woman started working there, the mornings seemed less cold, less automatic. And that bothered him. He couldn't explain why, but every time he passed her in the kitchen, he felt something tighten in his chest, as if there were an old memory trying to emerge there. The funny thing is that she also watched him, secretly. When he left in the car, when he left his cup on the table, when he forgot his tie on the couch. She knew more about him than he did. She knew his bad moods, his silences, his lost gazes in the window, and without saying a word, she began to take care of him in invisible ways. She would increase the drying time a little, so that the clothes would be softer, change the coffee filter for a softer one, fold the sheets with care. And finally, she would spray perfume on his shirts, the same perfume she used on himself. Only he never knew about it. It was the only way she had of leaving a part of herself in his world. She didn't dare talk. She didn't dare dream. She knew she didn't belong there. But every time she saw him leave all dressed up, with her scent clinging to the collar of his shirt, she felt a pang of pride mixed with sadness. She didn't want to be seen. She just wanted him to, by some miracle, notice her, even if he didn't know it. And he, wrapped up in his own arrogance and routine, never noticed. Until the day she woke up to find the house too silent, with the clothes in the closet smelling only of ordinary soap, and realized that what filled the air every day had a name, and it was gone. The next morning, he opened the closet door with the same automatic gesture as always, but hesitated for a few seconds. He ran his hand over the shirts lined up, all impeccably white, but when he brought them close to his face, he felt an emptiness. There was no longer any smell, no trace, nothing, but the industrial perfume of the common fabric softeners that he had never bothered to choose. It was then that, for the first time in many years, he brought the shirt to his face and took a deep breath, as if he wanted to find in it some answer that eluded him. And when he felt nothing, when everything smelled like nothing, a strange melancholy invaded him, but he didn't know how to name it. He simply got dressed, more slowly than usual, and went downstairs to have breakfast. The kitchen was silent. The table was set. The coffee was hot. The bread was cut in half. Everything was as usual, but at the same time, different. Static. Soulless. He sat down, not hungry. He picked up the cup with trembling hands, and as he brought it to his lips, he noticed that the taste of the coffee had changed too. It was stronger, bitter, almost acidic. He frowned. It was impossible not to notice, and only then, like a distant breath of memory, did he realize that in the last few months the coffee had always been mild. He had never stopped to notice. Only now, with that harsh taste in his mouth, did he understand that someone took care of the details to make his days less hard. He looked around. Her absence screamed in the air. Her blue uniform wasn't hanging in the laundry room. Her footsteps didn't echo quietly upstairs, and no sound of dishes being washed filled the emptiness. It was as if the house had gotten bigger and colder overnight. He got up and went to his office. He sat down at his desk, opened his laptop but couldn't type a single word. The cursor blinked impatiently as if mocking his paralysis. He felt out of place, almost ridiculous for being affected by something so subtle. That was when he called the domestic services agency. The attendant's voice was robotic and indifferent. He asked about the employee. He didn't even know her full name. The attendant replied that the woman had resigned 2 days earlier. He said she had left silently, without making any demands, or explaining why. She had simply handed over her badge, left her keys and left. That disconcerted him. She had left before she had even been dismissed, as if she had already known that there was no place for her there, as if she had realized that she was just an invisible body moving through a house that did not allow feelings. And it was then that he noticed the first crack in himself. A strange feeling, similar to remorse, or maybe regret. But regret for what? He had never treated her badly. He had never raised his voice, but he had also never seen her. He had never wanted to know her name, where she came from, if there was someone waiting for her at the end of the day. He had always thought he was doing enough, just by not being cruel. And now he felt her absence like a broken mirror. It was as if a part of him had been ripped away without warning. And the worst part, he only realized how valuable she was after he lost her. That afternoon, he didn't go back to his office. He sat on the couch in the living room, motionless, looking at the house. Too clean, too quiet, too perfect, and completely sterile. The neutral smell, the cold furniture, the absence of any human trace. It was like being inside a display case where everything exists but nothing lives. He grabbed the remote control, tried to watch the news, then some documentary, but nothing could hold his attention. It was as if a fog had settled over his eyes, a fog made of memories he never wanted to keep, but now begged for space. He got up and went to the laundry room, a room he rarely visited. The door was ajar, and the afternoon sun streamed in through the cracks in the window, illuminating the room with a soft glow. Inside, everything remained in order. The baskets were empty, the ironing board leaned against the wall, the machine was turned off. But on the counter was a small, translucent bottle of pink liquid. He picked up the bottle, twisted the cap, and a familiar scent filled the air. It was perfume. That sweet, clean scent that for months he had smelled on his clothes without understanding where it was coming from. He stood there, holding the bottle with a trembling hand, as if he were holding a piece of a puzzle he had never bothered to put together. Slowly he raised the bottle to his face and closed his eyes. The scent reminded him of things he hadn't even known he remembered. His mother combing her hair by the window, a childhood neighbor who wore floral dresses, a summer long ago, a time when someone had cared for him out of love, not obligation. And now that perfume was all that remained of someone who had served him tenderly, without him ever saying, "Thank you." In the days that followed, he tried to follow his routine. But everything seemed different. The food arrived cold, the sheets were scratchy, the household objects seemed lifeless. New employees at the agency came and went, but none of them lasted. He had become too demanding, or maybe he had realized. Too late that the things that really mattered couldn't be hired. One sleepless night, he went down to the living room and started opening drawers. He was looking for something. He didn't know what. Maybe a clue, a piece of paper, anything that would tell him who she was. He found a small box kept inside the cleaning supplies cabinet. Inside was a floral-covered diary. He hesitated before opening it. The first few pages were blank, but toward the end, he found random sentences written in pencil. Things like, "He's tired today. It was cold. I left the tea on the desk. The collar was stained with coffee. I washed it carefully. I hope he notices." He flipped through each page with a lump in his throat. The writing was simple, the sentences short, but there was more love in them than in all the emails and contracts he had ever read in his life. It was a silent chronicle of someone who watched without being seen, who loved without expecting anything, who existed behind the scenes of his life, and who was now unbearably missed. That same night, still holding the small diary in his hands, he let himself fall onto the living room rug like a man who has finally given up. The lights in the house were off, leaving only the dim light of the outside lamps filtering through the windows, and in that silence he began to read the notes again, word by word, trying to find a thread in them that would lead him to her. In each simple sentence, he felt as if he could hear her voice, a voice he had never paid attention to, but which now echoed within him with unexpected force. It was as if he were reading between the lines of his own absence, a diary not of routine, but of hidden affection. Some pages had dates on them, and he began to associate them with his own days. He remembered the day he came back from a meeting furious and threw his folder on the kitchen table, and there was written, "He looks so lonely. I made him tea the way he likes it." In another passage, written in shaky handwriting, "I dreamed he was really looking at me. I woke up with my heart full and my hands empty." That was when he felt his eyes burn. He had never cried over anything like that. He didn't even know how to react to that strange pain, which mixed guilt, longing, and regret in almost unbearable doses. At the bottom of the diary was a folded newspaper clipping, an old article about a local church choir. Among the voices of the community, a woman smiled shyly in the photo, holding flowers. It took him a while to recognize her, but it was her. The same face that had discreetly crossed the halls of the house, the same low-set gaze that now looked at him for the first time, frozen in paper. Driven by a new impulse, he left home the next morning with no particular destination in mind. He went to the address of the church that was listed at the bottom of the article. He parked on the other side of the street and watched the movement for a few minutes. It was a simple neighborhood, different from his world surrounded by concrete and mirrors. People walked slowly, greeted each other, and carried bags with fruit, books, and flowers. As he entered the church, the smell of old wood and incense enveloped him. There were a few faithful sitting in the pews praying in silence. He approached the reception desk and asked for her. The lady who served him smiled kindly, but she couldn't hide her surprise. Yes, she had sung in the choir for many years. Then she got sick. Then she disappeared. No one knew for sure where she went. He thanked her and left with his heart even heavier. Her absence took on new layers, and in all of them, he was on the side that never looked back. He drove through the streets as if searching for a ghost. All that remained was a memory attached to the smell that still haunted his memory. That floral perfume that he now recognized anywhere. A smell that somehow haunted him with tenderness and made him understand that, even in silence, she loved him more than any noisy woman who had ever passed through his life, and he never knew how to respond. Because I never knew what it was like to be loved without condition. The following week, he began visiting that church frequently, without really knowing what he was looking for. He would sit in the back pews in silence, watching the people who came and went calmly, as if time had a different rhythm there. He had never been religious. His life had always been guided by goals, spreadsheets, contracts, and calculated decisions. But now something was making him come back. It was as if, in that sacred and simple environment, he was trying to find her traces, not with his eyes, but with his heart. With each visit, she noticed little details. The way the stained glass windows let the sun paint the floor with soft colors, the sound of candles flickering in the wind, the smell of old wood that reminded her of her childhood. And one day, while looking at the bulletin board and community events, she found an aged sheet of paper pinned with a gold pin. It was an old choir pamphlet. There was a list of members' names, among them hers, written in simple but firm handwriting. Next to it, a small heart was drawn, and below it, a phrase: "Those who sing pray twice." He touched that paper as if it were a reliquary. He kept the image in his memory and returned home once again with a heavy heart. In the living room, he sat in front of the unlit fireplace and reread the pages of the diary once more. He began to realize that her world revolved around small gestures. She never tried to attract attention. She never invaded his space, but she cared for him like someone who loved in silence. It was as if she existed on a plane where love didn't need to be said, only felt. And only now, with her far away, did he feel it clearly. One night, he decided to dig deeper. He took his car and drove to the neighborhood where she supposedly lived, which he had discreetly noted on the back cover of his diary. The streets were narrow, the houses simple. Children played ball on the sidewalk. Ladies chatted in rocking chairs. He felt like a stranger there, with his expensive suit and face marked by regret. He knocked on a few doors, asking carefully, avoiding seeming intrusive. Most of them didn't know. Some remembered her vaguely as the quiet girl who came and went, always with her head down, until an older neighbor pointed out a house with low walls and a porch with dried ferns. There, time seemed to have stopped. The door was ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry and never returned. He knocked, but no one answered. On the porch, there was a wooden bench with a blanket over it and a cup forgotten in the corner. He approached slowly. The cup still had lipstick marks faded by time. His heart sank. It was as if he were entering a scene that had been on pause since she left. In the corner of the room, through the window, she saw a shelf with prayer books, old. Photographs and dried flowers in glass jars. Everything about it seemed to have been made with delicacy. Everything screamed an absence full of presence. He didn't come in. He just stood there in front of the house, trying to ask for forgiveness with his eyes, as if the air could carry his repentance to her, as if silence could explain everything he never said. And then, for the first time in years, he closed his eyes and whispered her name, the name he had never dared to say when she was still around, like a prayer lost in time, like an "I'm sorry" that came too late. After that day, he was never the same. Something inside him had cracked, not violently, but like glass exposed to the heat of a silent truth. He walked home slowly, his hands still dirty from the dust of the porch, and his chest full of memories he had previously refused to feel. When he entered, he realized how much too big his house was for a life that had shrunk. Everything seemed emptier, more impersonal. Every perfectly arranged object now seemed to mock the fact that he had never known what truly mattered. He began to live in slow motion. I would wake up, but I would no longer run on the treadmill. The coffee was still bitter, the shirts were still odorless, and the silence screamed in every corner of the house. He began to visit the markets in her neighborhood, to sit on the benches in the squares that she might have passed by one day. He observed ordinary people with the eyes of someone who had never noticed life happening. He discovered a small thrift store that she used to frequent, according to the owner, that quiet girl who always left the books she read as donations. He bought one of them. It was a copy of Little Women, with some pages marked by dried petals. On the back cover there was a handwritten note, "One day I will be seen." He read the entire book in one night. He cried silently. That phrase, "One day I will be seen," kept going around in his mind like a sentence. He now saw everything he didn't want to see. She wasn't just an employee. She was presence, she was care, she was hope hidden between the lines of a merciless routine. He started writing letters to her, even without knowing where his hands were now. Letters that began with "Forgive me" and ended with Thank you for everything you gave me without asking for anything. She kept the letters in a wooden box, along with the bottle of perfume that hadn't yet emptied. Sometimes I would open the lid, just to smell it and feel like she was there. He started leaving fresh flowers on the bench on her porch, always the same ones, white daisies, the only ones he knew how to buy without making a mistake. On one of these visits, he found an envelope in the same place where he left the flowers. It was small, simple, written in a handwriting he would recognize even with his eyes closed. Inside was a single sentence. I saw you, even when you didn't see me. His hand shook. The world stopped. The air grew thick. There was no signature, but he knew. She had been there, and she had written back. It tore him apart and healed him at the same time. Because now he knew that somehow, even in her emotional blindness, she forgave him. Not with words, but with that final gesture, so hers, so gentle, so full of everything he ever needed to learn. Love without show, presence without demands. From that day on, something changed. He began to smile more often. He returned to church, now with a different outlook. He began to listen more than he spoke, to observe more than he judged. He began to discreetly fund scholarships for domestic workers in her community without ever revealing his name. It was his way of giving back to the world what she had planted in him, even if it was late, even if it was the way he managed to do it. It started with small gestures. He, who had never had time for anyone, now held the elevator door open for strangers. He greeted the girl in the cafeteria with a sincere, "Good morning." He began to listen to his employees patiently, without rushing through his sentences. In his company, he created a silent support program for invisible workers, caregivers, cleaners, waitresses, offering training, medical consultations, and even community reading sessions. He didn't put his name on any pamphlets. He didn't make speeches. He simply watched from afar as these women flourished with the support he had once denied them, with his silence. In the solitude of the night, he still reread the letters he wrote. He didn't send them. They were just his, like prayers that no one hears out loud, but that are heard inside. One of them said, "I thought you were part of the furniture. Now I know you were the heart of the house." In another, "If I had asked your name, maybe today I would have someone to share this emptiness with." He wrote, and at the same time, he transformed himself. He began to notice the small beauties of life that had previously passed him by like smoke. The smell of bread in the morning at the bakery on the corner, the sound of leaves in autumn, the child who smiled on the subway for no reason. Everything seemed new, as if he were relearning to live with clear eyes, as if she, even from a distance, had lent him her way of seeing the world. Then one day when he opened his closet, he found an old shirt he hadn't worn in months. It was clean, but yellowed with age. As he brought it closer to his face, he smelled a faint thread of perfume, almost imperceptible but still there. He closed his eyes and held the fabric against his chest. It was as if it had left a farewell, as if to say, "I was here." He took the shirt to the garden. He planted a flower under the tree that grew near the porch. He buried the fabric carefully, as if offering a memory to the earth. And there, sitting in the shade, he stayed for hours. He no longer needed to run, or win, or prove anything. For the first time, he was at peace with the pain of having learned too late. He understood that there are loves that don't scream, that don't ask, that only manifest themselves in absence, and that when discovered, they make us better. Even if time doesn't allow us to go back, there is an inexplicable beauty in being touched by someone who taught us everything, without saying anything. That spring he began to frequent public libraries. He sat among the ancient shelves, searching for books that she might have read too. He looked for pencil marks, notes in the margins, forgotten petals between pages, any trace that would connect her back to his existence. He couldn't find her, but strangely, he felt her presence in every gesture, in every page he turned reverently. It was as if she were in everything, even though she was nowhere. She began to write more, not just letters, but memoirs. She transformed her memories into silent chronicles, full of longing and healing. She kept everything in a notebook with a blue cover, similar to the uniform she wore. She wrote in black pen, as if she wanted to firmly mark what she had previously ignored. On one of these pages she wrote, "I don't know where you are, but I have learned to see who you were, and that has changed me forever." He began to observe people on the streets with more sensitivity. He saw women pushing shopping carts, girls collecting trash, young men serving trays in cafes, and he wondered how many of them could be doing for someone exactly what she did for him, offering presents with perfume, love without a face, affection without a contract. One afternoon, walking downtown, she saw a young woman with features similar to hers. Her heart raced. She approached hesitantly, but it took her a second to realize it wasn't her. And yet, she stood there for longer than she should have, observing this stranger from afar, as if the universe was telling her that there are versions of her scattered everywhere. Invisible women who sustain the world with sweetness and silence. Returning home, she decided to do something she had been avoiding for months, empty her closet. He took out each piece of clothing, one by one, until he found the wooden box where she kept her perfume bottle and diary. This time he opened it with more courage. Inside, among the letters, was a photo he didn't remember seeing. It was an old photograph, probably taken by someone in the community. She was smiling. Not the smile of someone being seen, but of someone seeing. A serene, clean smile that pierced his chest like a gentle bolt of lightning. He placed the photo in a small frame and left it on his nightstand, not as a reminder of someone he had lost, but as the presence of someone who had finally been recognized. Every night before going to sleep, he would light a candle next to the frame and sit in silence for a few minutes. It was his way of saying everything he hadn't said. "Thank you. I miss you. You changed my life." That absence began to live with him, not as pain, but as awareness, as a constant reminder that details are everything, that small gestures have weight, that a scent can contain a universe, and that the biggest mistake is to believe that those who serve do not feel. Over time, he became known in the community, but not as the wealthy and distant man he used to be. Now he was seen as someone who helped in silence, who listened unhurriedly, who showed up at church meetings only to hear stories that were not his own. Many did not know his name. They called him simply the man of the white flowers, because of his habit of leaving daisies on park benches in anonymous windows, on doors that seemed forgotten. It was his secret ritual, his way of honoring all the invisible women who, like her, left perfume in the details and hope in the gaps of the world. One afternoon, he sat on the same bench where he had left the first flower in her honor. He watched the orange sky slowly fade when a child approached him with a note in her hand. "My grandmother sent this to you," she said, pointing to an old woman sitting on the other side of the square. He looked at her, his heart racing. The woman was elderly, with her hair tied up and an embroidered scarf around her shoulders. She smiled with her eyes. He opened the note with trembling hands. It said, "She has read all your letters, and she prays for you." He felt his legs weaken. He crossed the square as if he were crossing an abyss. When he got close to the lady, she held out her hand, firmly, as if she already knew him. "You are the man who took a while to see but saw," she said. "She holds no grudges. She just wanted to be remembered as someone who tried to teach love." He couldn't speak. He knelt right there, at the feet of that woman who might be a relative, or perhaps just the bearer of a message from destiny. She handed him a yellowed envelope, sealed with ribbon. She asked that it be delivered to you when you were ready. He held the gift as if he were holding his own. Heart. He walked home in silence, opened the wooden box, lit the candle, and only then broke the ribbon seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, in the same handwriting as the diary. It began, "If you're reading this, it's because you've finally seen me." Along the lines, she said that she knew she was invisible to his eyes, but that she chose to love him anyway. "Not because you deserved it, but because I needed to leave something beautiful in a dry place." She also said that she didn't expect to be recognized, but that something in her told her that one day he would understand. At the end, a single sentence stood out: "Love only changes the world when it first changes the hearts of those who cannot see." He read and reread that sentence until he fell asleep with the letter on his chest, and that night he dreamed of her for the first time. She didn't say anything. She just smiled, her eyes downcast and her hands busy folding clothes that smelled like flowers. And in the background, as if coming from another dimension, soft music filled the silence. He woke up crying, but for the first time he cried in peace. In the days that followed, he carried that letter in his jacket pocket, carefully folded, as if it were a sacred map. Sometimes he would touch it without realizing it, in the middle of meetings, walks, or when the world around him seemed to return to its cruel speed of before. It was his amulet against oblivion, the constant reminder that there was love even in silence, and that he had been loved not for what he showed, but in spite of everything he hid. One day, during a conference in another state, he sat in an elegant restaurant, surrounded by executives talking loudly about profits and strategy. The food was expensive, the ambiance luxurious, but everything about it seemed distant from the life that now mattered. He looked at his plate and remembered the simplicity of the meals she prepared. He remembered the smooth coffee, the bread cut in half, the pitcher of water with lemon slices, small gestures that together created a home. He got up without finishing his meal and walked through the streets of the unfamiliar city. He walked into a small corner flower shop. The smell of earth and fresh petals enveloped him like a hug. He asked for a bouquet of white daisies. The florist smiled and said, "They're not common among men." He replied with tears in his eyes, "They're all I have left of someone who never raised his voice, but changed." Everything. He paid in silence and left. On the way back, he passed a public school. Children ran around the playground laughing. A teacher called their names with gentle firmness. He stopped for a few minutes. Life went on, pulsating, and there, in that moment, he understood that perhaps the true meaning of everything was exactly that: to go unnoticed, but to leave a scent. Back in the city, he decided to visit the house where she lived again. He no longer had any hope of finding her, but he needed to see that place one more time. He arrived at the gate late in the afternoon. The ferns had been replaced by other flowers. A young woman opened the door. He asked in a low voice if the old resident still lived there. The woman smiled. "It was my aunt. She moved to the countryside, but she left a lot of her things here." He was invited in. The house was still modest but alive. On the shelf was a small frame with a photo he had never seen before. She was standing in front of the house, holding a basket of clothes and smiling. Beside her, a candle was lit. The young woman explained, "She said that as long as someone could smell the flowers, she would not be far away." He closed his eyes. He breathed in the air, and yes, there it was, soft, discreet, persistent. When he left the bouquet on the porch. He didn't need to say anything. She would understand. Somewhere, perhaps reading another book, perhaps making tea for someone, she would know that this gesture was his. And that even late he had learned what no one had taught him. The truest love is the one that perfumes but does not impose itself. That gives itself but does not demand it. That transforms, even if it is not seen. After that last encounter with her features in the old house, he no longer tried to find her physically. He finally understood that her presence was not restricted to an address, an object, an image. She had spread inside him, to places where before there had only been haste and vanity. And perhaps that was more powerful than any reunion. It was no longer about seeing her. It was about keeping her alive in the choices, in the gestures, in the way he treated the world. She went back to work, but in a different way. She set up a break room just for cleaning staff. She created an internal library with books donated in her name. She asked that the following question be included on the hiring forms. "What is your favorite perfume?" No one understood at first, but he knew. It was a subtle way of reminding everyone that even the smallest feature of someone can tell a whole story. At a year-end meeting, for the first time in decades, he stood up to thank not the partners or major partners, but the women who took care of the invisible details of the company. He simply said, "You are the soul of what everyone sees as success." He was applauded in silence, with tears in his eyes. And at the end of the event, one of the employees approached him, took a small bottle from her purse and said, "I thought you might like to keep this scent." It was the same perfume. He held the bottle with both hands, as if holding an heirloom. He began writing weekly columns for the local newspaper. He did not sign his name, but with a simple pseudonym, "The Man Who Learned to See." His columns told stories of anonymous kindnesses, silent loves, lives that pass unnoticed but leave deep marks. One day, he received a letter from the countryside, written in a familiar handwriting. It simply said, "I read you every week, and now, finally, I see you too." There was no name, there was no address, but he knew it was her. It was then that he realized that what had happened between them needed no continuation, no reunion, no explanations. It was like a song that ends in silence and continues playing inside his chest. She taught him to listen to what no one said, to see what no one showed, to be grateful for what once seemed like an obligation. And now, in every detail of his life, in the way he rolled up his shirt sleeves, in the care he took with his coffee, in the choice of flowers, he kept her alive. Not out of guilt, but out of gratitude, because she had been the only person who had loved him without ever demanding anything in return, who had touched him not with her hands but with her absence, and it was in that absence that he had remade himself. The world moved on, the seasons changed, but inside him something remained eternal. The scent of the shirts that he once thought were clean by chance, and that in truth carried a silent declaration of love, one that he only knew how to read when it was too late. Every birthday, he would leave a bouquet of daisies at the door of the church where he had last seen her. He never wrote any notes, he never signed them. It was a gesture just for her, or for what was left of her in the world. Sometimes he would find a new bottle of perfume discreetly left in the same place, and then he would know she was still near, even if far away. They never saw each other again. There were no hugs, no words, but there were signs. And that was enough. At corporate meetings, he no longer wore the same shirts. He began to prefer simpler, more discreet fabrics that didn't speak so much of power. But one piece in particular always came back to him, that old shirt washed with perfume that he only wore when he needed courage. It was his emotional armor. No one knew it. But he did. That shirt reminded him of what was essential, of what couldn't be bought. He began giving lectures in public schools. He spoke little. He preferred to tell stories. One in particular, the story of the woman who perfumed the world in silence. He never mentioned names, but he described them with such tenderness that the students fell into absolute silence, as if they had been transported to another time. In the end, one of his phrases became the motto of many young people. The most important people you will ever meet in your life may never raise their voices. He also started visiting nursing homes. He would bring flowers. He didn't say why. He just smiled. One day he met a blind woman who held his hand for several minutes without asking anything. When he tried to say goodbye, she said, "I smelled it. That was your love, wasn't it?" He cried without being able to answer, because that was exactly what it was, the love that remained in the air. At home, the candle next to the photo was still lit every night. It was as if time was in no hurry to take her away for good. He understood that it was no longer about having or finding her again, but about honoring the gesture, honoring the lesson, honoring the invisible woman who showed him what it was to be human. Many years passed. His hair turned white, his steps slowed. The house now had more books than furniture, more flowers than mirrors, and the soft scent of daisies, recreated by him in a handmade soap that he insisted on using. At the end of each day, he would write a new line for her. Sometimes it was just a few sentences, other times just one word. "I saw you. Thank you. I miss you." It was his way of continuing to talk to someone who had never spoken to him about love, but who had taught him everything. That Sunday morning the sky was clear, like the days when memories insist on returning. He walked slowly through the trees of the city's main square. It was a community event, one of those he used to avoid in the past, but which he now attended with the same zeal as someone visiting a temple. There was laughter, children, entire families, the smell of popcorn and cotton candy. But none of that distracted him from what his eyes found in the center of the square, a new garden of white daisies. In the middle of that garden there was a small wooden plaque with delicately carved letters. He approached it with slow steps, his heart racing, his hands sweaty. He read, with his voice stuck in his throat, "This garden was created in honor of the women who love in silence, to those who perfume the world without being seen." Below, a simple signature, "In memory of those who transformed my absence into forgiveness." He staggered for a moment. He knew it was for her, but he didn't know that that public space had been transformed into a symbol of everything he had lived in secret. And then, as if the universe had been waiting all these years for this moment, a young woman approached with a group of students. She was carrying folders, papers, and a small bookcase. When she saw him standing in front of the plaque, she smiled respectfully. "Are you the author of the Chronicles, the man who learned to see?" He nodded, saying nothing. The young woman then pointed to a table covered with colorful books. "We are launching the first issue of your stories. We have called it Scented Shirts. It is to inspire young people to notice the invisible. It was the idea of someone very special." He approached the table. In the center was a blue-covered book with an illustration of a white shirt folded over daisies. When he opened it, on the dedication page he read, "To the woman who taught me that love doesn't need to be said, just felt, and to all those who take their time, but one day learn to see." The girl then handed him an envelope. "She wrote this when she heard about the book. She asked us to deliver it on the day of the launch in case you showed up." He took it with trembling hands. He opened it slowly. Inside, a sheet of paper folded in four, with the most familiar perfume in the world to him, the same as always. The letter said, "You took a long time, and I left. But even from a distance, I saw every gesture, every flower, every silence transformed into presence. I didn't want you to love me. I just wanted you to learn to love. Because love, my dear, is not what we feel when we're together. It's what remains when we leave. I left, but you stayed. And you became who I saw behind the hurried. Man, now you're a garden, and me, I'm the wind that perfumes the flowers." He held the letter to his chest, closed his eyes, and felt it. For the first time, it wasn't longing. It was peace. That night, when he returned home, he lit the candle as he always did, but instead of writing a new letter, he left his diary on the table with the following note: "Today I saw you everywhere, and in everyone. You smiled." And then he blew out the candle. But the scent, it remained in the air. If this story touched your heart, click I liked. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any new excitement. Write in the comments, "I also learned to see." We want to read your story. Now watch the video that is appearing on the screen and prepare to feel even more, because some absences say it all.